Everyone thought Chief Okonkwo's family was blessed. The chief was respected. His wife was admired. Their children attended good schools. Their mansion was one of the most beautiful houses in Lagos. From the outside, they looked like the kind of family every parent wanted to become. Every Sunday, they sat together in church. Every Christmas, people admired them. Every visitor who entered their home believed they were looking at the perfect family. But behind the walls of that beautiful mansion was a secret that nobody talked about. Not even the chief himself. Because for years, a young girl lived under that roof carrying a burden she was never supposed to carry. She woke up before sunrise. She cleaned. She cooked. She washed clothes. She worked until her body could barely keep going. And every single day, she waited for one thing. A promise. A promise that never came. But the most shocking part of this story is not what happened to that girl. The most shocking part is what eventually happened to the children who had everything. Because while one child was learning responsibility through hardship, other children were growing up without understanding the value of responsibility at all. Years later, life would expose a truth nobody in that family expected. A truth that would leave behind regrets, broken dreams, and painful lessons. But before we get to that part, we need to go back to where everything began. Back to a small village. Back to a promise. Back to the day Adaeze's parents believed their daughter's future had finally arrived. Long before anyone knew how this story would end, there was a quiet village where everybody knew one another. It was the kind of place where children played freely in open fields, where neighbors shared food, and where everybody's struggles were known by the entire community. Among the villagers lived a young girl named Adaeze. She was respectful, hardworking, kind-hearted, and deeply loved by her parents. Although life was not easy for them, Adaeze's parents never stopped dreaming of a better future for their daughter. They wanted her to go to school. They wanted her to become successful. They wanted her to have opportunities they never had. But dreams can be difficult when poverty sits at your doorstep. Many nights, after dinner, Adaeze's parents would sit outside their small house discussing the same problem. How would they pay school fees? How would they give their daughter the education she deserved? How would they change the direction of her life? Unfortunately, they had no answers. Then one day, something happened that seemed like a miracle. News spread quickly through the village. Chief Okonkwo had arrived. The chief was one of the most respected men to ever come from that community. People admired his success. They admired his wealth. And they admired how far he had come in life. Whenever he visited the village, people gathered around him. Children followed him. Women greeted him warmly. Men stood respectfully whenever he approached. This particular visit seemed no different. At least, that was what everyone thought. Because nobody knew that before the visit was over, a decision would be made that would change Adaeze's life forever. The chief's wife, Madam Ngozi, noticed Adaeze almost immediately. She watched the young girl helping her mother. She noticed how obedient she was. How hardworking she appeared. How quickly she responded whenever she was called. A few days later, Madam Ngozi paid a visit to Adaeze's parents. At first, they were nervous. Why would the wife of a wealthy chief come to their humble home? But Madam smiled. She spoke kindly. She reassured them. Then she made an offer that sounded like an answer to every prayer they had ever prayed. "Bring Adaeze to Lagos," she said. "Let her stay with us. We will take care of her. We will send her to school. We will treat her like our own child." For a moment, Adaeze's parents could hardly believe what they were hearing. A chance for their daughter to live in Lagos. A chance for her to get a proper education. A chance for her future to change forever. It sounded too good to be true. And sometimes, the things that sound too good to be true usually are. But hope has a way of silencing doubt. And so, after many discussions, the decision was made. Adaeze would leave the village. She would move to Lagos. She would begin a new chapter of her life. The night before her departure, her mother carefully folded her clothes. She packed every item with love. At several moments, tears filled her eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of hope. Her daughter was finally getting the opportunity she had always dreamed of. The following morning, neighbors gathered to say goodbye. Some congratulated the family. Others prayed for Adaeze. Many people described her as the luckiest girl in the village. As the vehicle prepared to leave, Adaeze hugged her mother tightly. Her father placed his hand on her head and prayed for her journey. Neither of them knew it then. But that goodbye would become one of the most painful memories of their lives. Because the future they imagined for Adaeze was not the future waiting for her in Lagos. Not even close. As the vehicle drove away, Adaeze looked back one final time at the village she called home. She smiled. She was excited. She was hopeful. She believed she was traveling toward her dreams. What she did not know was that the promise everyone celebrated was already beginning to break. And when she finally arrived at Chief Okonkwo's mansion, the first signs of trouble would begin to appear. For most of the journey, Adaeze could not stop smiling. Everything around her felt exciting. The roads were busier than anything she had ever seen. The buildings seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. The vehicles moved so quickly that she sometimes found herself staring through the window in amazement. This was Lagos. The city she had heard so much about. The city where dreams were supposed to come true. And as she sat quietly in the vehicle, Adaeze imagined what her new life would be like. She imagined herself wearing a school uniform. She imagined making new friends. She imagined returning to her village one day as a successful young woman. The future looked bright. At least, that was what she believed. Hours later, they finally arrived at Chief Okonkwo's mansion. The moment the gate opened, Adaeze's eyes widened. The compound was enormous. There were expensive cars parked neatly outside. The house itself looked larger than anything she had ever seen. For a moment, she felt lucky. Very lucky. Maybe her parents had been right. Maybe this was the beginning of a better life. But sometimes, the most beautiful places hide the darkest secrets. At first, everything seemed normal. Madam Ngozi showed her around the house. She introduced her to the children. The chief's daughters barely paid attention to her. The sons greeted her casually before returning to whatever they were doing. Nothing seemed unusual. That evening, Adaeze helped arrange a few things around the house. She did not complain. After all, she was grateful. Perhaps they were still making arrangements. Perhaps Lagos worked differently. But deep down, a small question had already started growing in her mind. When exactly was she going to school? One afternoon, she gathered enough courage to ask Madam Ngozi, "Ma, when will I start school?" Madam smiled. The kind of smile that immediately ended the conversation. "Very soon," she replied. "Just be patient." Adaeze nodded. She believed her. Why wouldn't she? After all, this was the same promise that brought her to Lagos. Weeks became months. And each time she asked, the answer remained the same. "Very soon. Next term. We are working on it. Just be patient." Meanwhile, the amount of work she did around the house slowly increased. She swept. She washed plates. She cleaned rooms. She helped in the kitchen. She ran errands. At first, she thought it was temporary. But with each passing day, the responsibilities became heavier. The strange part was that nobody else seemed concerned. The daughters woke up and prepared for school. The sons left the house every morning. Everybody had somewhere to go. Everybody except Adaeze. And although she tried not to think about it, she could not ignore what she was seeing. The children were moving forward. She was standing still. One morning, as she watched the chief's children preparing for school, something painful happened. One of the daughters complained about carrying her school bag. Adaeze stared silently. That single school bag represented the future she had been promised. The future she was still waiting for. For the first time since arriving in Lagos, doubt entered her heart. Had something changed? Had Madam Ngozi forgotten her promise? Or was there something nobody was telling her? At that moment, Adaeze had no idea that things were about to become much worse. Because the work she had been doing was only the beginning. And very soon, she would discover why the previous house help had disappeared without a trace. The first time Adaeze heard about the previous house help, it was by accident. Two women from the neighborhood were discussing something outside the gate. Adaeze was sweeping nearby when she overheard part of their conversation. "That other girl didn't last long in this house," one of them said. The other woman shook her head. "Can you blame her?" Before Adaeze could hear the rest, they noticed her presence and immediately changed the subject. At the time, she did not think much about it. But months later, she would understand exactly what they meant. Because little by little, the work inside the chief's house continued to grow. What had started as helping out soon became her entire life. Every day followed the same routine. And every day felt heavier than the one before. While most people were still sleeping, Adaeze was already awake. Sometimes she woke up at 3 in the morning. Sometimes even earlier. The first thing she did was enter the kitchen. There was always something waiting for her. Plates to wash. Food to prepare. Water to fetch. Floors to clean. And before the sun appeared, she was already exhausted. But her day was only beginning. As the chief's children woke up and prepared for school, Adaeze continued working. She washed clothes. She swept the compound. She cleaned bedrooms. She arranged furniture. She ran errands. She did whatever Madam Ngozi instructed her to do. And if she made the smallest mistake, there was always a complaint waiting for her. The painful part was not the work itself. The painful part was watching children her age live a completely different life. Every morning, she watched them leave for school. Every afternoon, she watched them return. Every evening, she watched them complete assignments. Sometimes she found herself staring at their books. Not because she wanted to touch them, but because she wondered what her own books would have looked like. She wondered what classroom she would have been sitting in. She wondered what future she was slowly losing. But that wasn't the only thing that troubled her. As the years passed, she began noticing something else. The chief's children were not being taught responsibility. Especially the daughters. Chioma, the eldest daughter, hardly lifted a finger inside the house. She rarely washed plates. Rarely cleaned. Rarely helped in the kitchen. Whenever there was work to be done, Adaeze was expected to handle it. Madam Ngozi seemed proud of this arrangement. She often said her children should focus on enjoying life. Meanwhile, Adaeze carried responsibilities that even some adults struggled with. One particular task became famous in the house. The vegetables. Madam Ngozi never liked buying vegetables already sliced. She preferred buying them in large quantities. Huge bags. Bags that would take hours to prepare. And guess who handled all of it? Adaeze. She would sit for hours cutting vegetables while everybody else went about their day. By the time she finished, her fingers hurt. Her back hurt. Her eyes hurt. Yet the next task was already waiting. Days became months. Months became years. And still, school never came. Every promise was pushed forward. Every excuse sounded the same. Next term. Next year. Be patient. Your time will come. But Adaeze was beginning to understand the painful truth. Her time was not coming. Not anytime soon. And the older she became, the harder it was to ignore that reality. The saddest part was that Chief Okonkwo seemed completely unaware. Whenever he was home, he appeared kind. He greeted her. He asked simple questions. Sometimes he even joked with her. Nothing about his behavior suggested that he knew what was really happening. And that created a question Adaeze could never answer. Did the chief know? Or was he living in the same house without seeing the truth? But while Adaeze struggled with those questions, another problem was quietly growing inside the family. The children were getting older. And some of the habits they had developed were beginning to follow them into adulthood. At the time, nobody paid attention. Nobody saw the warning signs. Nobody imagined that the same children who had everything would eventually become one of Madame Ngozi's greatest regrets. But life has a way of collecting debts. And sooner or later, every debt demands payment. Unfortunately for Madame Ngozi, that day was drawing closer. And when it finally arrived, it would bring consequences she never expected. Time has a strange way of revealing what people try to ignore. The years passed quickly. The little children in Chief Okonkwo's house were no longer children. They were becoming young adults. And as they grew older, the results of how they had been raised slowly began to show. At first, the signs were small. Easy to dismiss. Easy to excuse. But problems rarely begin as disasters. Most problems begin as habits. Habits that are ignored until they become impossible to control. By now, Adaeze had spent years in the house. Years. Years of cooking. Years of cleaning. Years of watching other people's children enjoy opportunities she had been promised. And during those same years, Madame Ngozi continued doing what she had always done. Protecting her children from responsibility. Especially her daughters. Chioma, the eldest daughter, had grown into a beautiful young woman. Many people admired her. Many people praised her appearance. But there was something else people noticed. Something that became harder to hide as she grew older. Chioma expected everybody to serve her. She disliked housework. She disliked being corrected. She disliked taking instructions. Whenever something needed to be done, she expected someone else to do it. And for years, that someone had been Adaeze. At home, time to correct them. Time to guide them. Time to fix things. What he did not realize was that time was moving faster than he thought. One day, one of the sons shocked the family. He announced that he wanted to become a priest. The house fell silent. The young man explained that he wanted to dedicate his life to serving God. But Chief Okonkwo refused immediately. The chief had his own plans. His own expectations. His own dreams for his sons. As far as he was concerned, none of them would become priests. The matter ended there. Or at least, that was what everyone believed. But although the conversation ended, the tension remained. The son never forgot it. And life continued moving forward. Meanwhile, Adaeze continued carrying responsibilities that should never have belonged to her. By now, she had become almost invisible inside the house. Not because people couldn't see her, but because they had become used to her presence. Used to seeing her walk. Used to seeing her suffer quietly. Used to relying on her. She was no longer treated like a guest. She was no longer treated like family. She was simply expected to be there. Expected to work. Expected to obey. Expected to remain silent. But outside the house, people were beginning to notice things. Neighbors watched. Visitors observed. And some of them started asking uncomfortable questions. Questions Madame Ngozi did not like. Questions she avoided answering. Questions that became harder to ignore with each passing year. One afternoon, A woman from the neighborhood looked directly at Adaeze and asked a simple question. A question nobody in that house wanted to hear. Why isn't this girl in school? The compound suddenly became quiet. Madam Ngozi quickly answered. She had an explanation ready. Just like always. But this time, the explanation sounded weaker. Even Adaeze could hear it. And for the first time, she began to realize something important. People were noticing. People were beginning to see what was happening. And maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Maybe somebody would eventually help her. Maybe somebody would finally listen. But while Adaeze was beginning to hope, another storm was quietly forming. A storm that would change everything. Because among all the people who noticed her suffering, one woman was paying closer attention than anyone else. A woman who lived nearby. A woman who had been watching for years. A woman who was about to make a decision that would alter Adaeze's life forever. And when that woman finally spoke to her, everything would begin to change. Sometimes, the people who change our lives are not family. Sometimes, they are strangers who simply choose to care. For years, many people had seen Adaeze working in Chief Okonkwo's house. They saw her sweeping. They saw her washing clothes. They saw her carrying out responsibilities that seemed too heavy for someone her age. Most people noticed. Very few people acted. But there was one woman in the neighborhood who paid attention. She had watched Adaeze for years. At first, she assumed the girl was attending school. After all, that was what everyone believed. That was what people had been told. But as time passed, something felt wrong. The woman never saw Adaeze wearing a school uniform. She never saw her leaving for classes. She never heard her discussing schoolwork. Instead, she always saw the same thing. Work. More work. And even more work. The woman became concerned. But concern alone was not enough. She needed answers. One afternoon, she found an opportunity to speak with Adaeze alone. The conversation began casually. Simple questions. Simple answers. Nothing unusual. Then she asked the question nobody had asked directly before. Adaeze, what class are you in? The young girl froze. For a few seconds, she did not know what to say. The silence was answer enough. The woman looked at her carefully. What school do you attend? Again, silence. And for the first time in years, Adaeze felt tears gathering in her eyes. The woman immediately understood. Something was terribly wrong. At first, Adaeze was afraid to talk. She had spent years keeping everything inside. Years protecting secrets that were never hers to protect. Years believing that speaking up would only make her situation worse. But pain has a limit. And eventually, silence becomes heavier than truth. Slowly, she began telling her story. The promise. The journey from the village. The years of waiting. The endless work. The excuses. The missed opportunities. Everything. By the time she finished, the woman sat quietly for a long moment. She could hardly believe what she had heard. A girl had been promised an education. Instead, she had become unpaid labor inside a wealthy home. The woman was angry. But she was also careful. She knew situations like this could become complicated. One wrong move could create even bigger problems for Adaeze. So she did not rush. Instead, she started looking for a solution. Over the following weeks, she spoke with trusted people. People she believed could help. People who would not expose Adaeze to more danger. Meanwhile, life inside the chief's house continued as usual. Madam Ngozi remained unaware. The children remained focused on themselves. And Adaeze continued carrying out her daily responsibilities. But something had changed. For the first time in years, she had hope. Real hope. not the empty promises she had been hearing for years. A different kind of hope. The hope that somebody finally believed her. The hope that somebody finally cared. The hope that her life might actually change. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Then one evening, the woman called Adaeze aside. Her voice was calm, but her words would change everything. "I think it's time for you to leave." Adaeze stared at her. "Leave? Leave and go where? Leave and do what?" The woman explained that she had spoken with people who were willing to help. People who could give her a fresh start. People who would not treat her like a servant. For a moment, Adaeze felt excited. Then fear quickly followed. She had spent so many years in the house that she no longer knew what life looked like outside it. What if things became worse? What if she failed? What if she had nowhere to go? The questions filled her mind. But then she remembered something. If she stayed, nothing would change. The promises would continue. The waiting would continue. The lost years would continue. And suddenly, the choice became clear. The difficult road ahead was still better than the life she was already living. A plan was quietly arranged. Every detail was carefully considered. Nobody wanted Madame Nosy to know. Nobody wanted unnecessary drama. Nobody wanted trouble. Everything would happen quietly. And then, one morning before sunrise, while the rest of the household slept peacefully, Adaeze made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. She picked up the few belongings she owned. She looked around one last time. And without making a sound, she walked toward the gate. Her heart was beating so loudly she thought the entire house could hear it. She had no idea what awaited her outside. She had no idea how difficult the next chapter of her life would be. But for the first time in years, she was choosing her own future. And sometimes, that is where freedom begins. Little did she know, however, that the hardest battles were still ahead. Because escaping the house was one thing. Building a life from nothing was something else entirely. Freedom sounded beautiful. But freedom without money, without education, and without a place to call home was a different kind of challenge. As Adaeze stepped out of Chief Okonkwo's compound that morning, she felt two emotions fighting inside her heart. Fear and hope. Fear because she did not know what would happen next. Hope because for the first time in years, her life belonged to her again. The woman who helped her escape kept her temporarily with a trusted family. It was not a luxurious place. It was not a mansion. There were no expensive cars parked outside. No security gates. No fancy furniture. But there was something Adaeze had not experienced in a very long time. Peace. For the first few days, she struggled to adjust. She would wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, thinking she had overslept. She would rush toward the kitchen before remembering that nobody was waiting to assign her endless chores. Years of hardship had trained her mind to expect pressure every moment of the day. Now, for the first time, there was silence. And strangely, the silence felt unfamiliar. But silence does not pay bills. Very soon, reality arrived. Adaeze needed work. She needed income. She needed a future. The problem was that she had spent years serving a family while the rest of the world moved forward. She had no certificates. No qualifications. No school records. No special connections. All she had was determination. And sometimes, determination is enough to begin. The first jobs she found were small. Very small. She helped people sell goods. She ran errands. She carried items from one place to another. She accepted whatever honest work came her way. Some days were good. Some days were terrible. There were days she earned almost nothing. Days when she wondered whether leaving the chief's house had been the right decision. Days when fear whispered that she had made a mistake. But every time those thoughts appeared, she reminded herself of one thing. Going back was not an option. The chapter of her life was closed. No matter how difficult things became, she had to move forward. Months passed. Then years. Slowly, Adaeze became stronger. Not physically. She had always been strong. Life inside the chief's house had made sure of that. What changed was her confidence. She started trusting herself. Trusting her decisions. Trusting her ability to survive. One opportunity led to another. One connection led to another. And before long, she found herself walking around Adaeze International Market. The market was unlike anything she had experienced before. Busy. Loud. Competitive. Every day thousands of people passed through. Every day businesses rose and fell. Every day people chased opportunities. At first, Adaeze struggled. The environment was tough. Mistakes were costly. Competition was fierce. But she learned quickly. Very quickly. The same discipline that had helped her survive years of hardship now became her greatest advantage. She arrived early. She worked hard. She paid attention. She listened. She learned. And people noticed. Customers trusted her. Employers trusted her. Colleagues respected her. Not because she was lucky, but because she had developed something many people lacked. Consistency. While others looked for shortcuts, Adaeze focused on doing the work. While others complained, she kept improving. Slowly, her life began changing. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But steadily. The kind of progress that is easy to miss until you look back and realize how far you've come. Years earlier, she had arrived in Lagos as a hopeful village girl. Then she became trapped in a life she never chose. Now she was becoming something else entirely. A woman determined to stand on her own feet. Meanwhile, far away from Adaeze Market, life inside Chief Okonkwo's family was moving in. Children were no longer children. The consequences of years of poor decisions were beginning to appear. And the first major crack would come from a place Madam Ngozi never expected. Her beloved daughter, Chioma. The same daughter she had protected from every responsibility. The same daughter she believed deserved the easiest life. The same daughter she had defended for years. Very soon, Chioma would enter marriage. And for the first time in her life, she would discover that the world outside her mother's house played by very different rules. And when that lesson arrived, it would arrive painfully. For years, Madam Ngozi believed she had done the right thing. Whenever relatives criticized her parenting, she ignored them. Whenever people suggested that her children should learn responsibility, she dismissed their concerns. After all, her children lacked nothing. They had food. They had clothing. They had opportunities. What more could a mother possibly want? Unfortunately, life measures success differently. And soon, Madam Ngozi would discover that providing comfort is not the same as preparing a child for adulthood. By now, Chioma had grown into a beautiful young woman. Suitors came and went. Friends admired her. Relatives praised her appearance. Eventually, she met a man named Emeka. At first, he seemed perfect. Polite. Respectful. Ambitious. Everything a family would hope for in a future son-in-law. The relationship moved quickly. Before long, wedding preparations began. The family was excited. Madam Ngozi was especially happy. She saw the marriage as proof that her daughter was doing well in life. The wedding was beautiful. Guests arrived from different places. Music filled the air. People danced. People celebrated. Photographs captured smiling faces. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But appearances can be deceptive. Because even before the marriage began, problems were already waiting. After the wedding, Chioma moved into her husband's family home. Emeka's mother owned a large house, and the newlyweds stayed there instead of renting their own apartment. At first, Chioma expected life to continue the way it always had. Comfortable, easy, convenient. She quickly discovered otherwise. The first disagreements were small. Simple household matters. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, organizing the home. The kind of responsibilities most adults handle every day. But Chioma struggled. Not because she was incapable of learning. Because she had never been required to learn. Years of being protected from responsibility had left her unprepared for ordinary life. Her mother-in-law noticed immediately. And unfortunately, she was not a patient woman. She had her own flaws. Her own difficult character. Her own sharp tongue. Instead of teaching gently, she criticized harshly. Instead of correcting with patience, she mocked. The tension between them grew quickly. Every mistake became an argument. Every disagreement became a battle. Every day brought fresh conflict. Soon, the house felt less like a home and more like a battlefield. But there was another problem. A bigger problem. A problem Chioma failed to see. Her husband was changing. Or perhaps he had never been who she thought he was. At first, Emeka appeared supportive. Then he became distant. Then secretive. Then cold. The more time passed, the more Chioma felt something was wrong. Conversations became shorter. Arguments became more frequent. Trust began to disappear. Still, she hoped things would improve. She believed every marriage faced challenges. She believed they could work through their problems. What she did not know was that Emeka had his own plans. Plans that had little to do with building a future together. By the time Chioma realized the truth, it was already too late. Money had changed hands. Promises had been broken. And the man she trusted most was preparing to walk away. When Emeka eventually left the country, he promised he would send for her. He promised they would build a better future together. He promised their separation was only temporary. But some promises are made to be broken. Weeks passed. Then months. Then more months. The phone calls became less frequent. The future she imagined disappeared. And for the first time in her life, Chioma found herself facing a reality her mother could not protect her from. Heartbreak. Failure. Consequences. Meanwhile, back at Madam Ngozi's house, the problems were multiplying. Chioma's marriage was not the only disappointment arriving at her doorstep. The sons were creating troubles of their own. Troubles that would soon force the family to confront uncomfortable truths they had spent years avoiding. And as those problems continued to grow, Madam Ngozi would begin asking herself a painful question. Had she spent so much time controlling another woman's child that she forgot to properly guide her own? Unfortunately, the answer was already beginning to reveal itself. And what she saw was not encouraging. If Chioma's failed marriage was the first crack in Madam Ngozi's world, it was certainly not the last. In fact, while she was busy worrying about her daughter, another problem had already taken root much closer to home. Her sons. For years, people had warned her. Relatives had spoken. Neighbors had hinted. Even some family friends had quietly expressed concern. But like many parents, Madam Ngozi believed her children would eventually mature. She believed time would fix what discipline had not. Unfortunately, time has a habit of exposing problems, not hiding them. The boys were now grown men. Yet many of the habits they developed as teenagers remained with them. They disliked correction. They avoided responsibility. They spent more time listening to friends than listening to advice. And slowly, some of those friendships began leading them in dangerous directions. At first, the signs seemed small. Late nights. Questionable companions. Unexplained absences. Excuses that never quite added up. Chief Okonkwo noticed. The chief was not a foolish man. He understood that something was changing. Something was slipping away. But every attempt to regain control seemed to come too late. The more he tried to correct them, the less they listened. The more he advised them, the more they resisted. The boys who once respected his authority were becoming men who wanted to live by their own rules. And those rules were leading them into trouble. One evening, after another argument, Chief Okonkwo sat quietly on his veranda. For a long time, he said nothing. The house was silent. The compound was silent. Only the sounds of distant traffic could be heard. For the first time in many years, the chief felt helpless. He had built businesses. He had earned respect. He had achieved success. Yet somehow, the one thing he wanted most seemed to be slipping through his fingers. His family. The painful truth was becoming impossible to ignore. His children had been given opportunities that many young people only dreamed about. But opportunities mean little without direction. And direction means little if nobody follows it. Meanwhile, life continued teaching lessons nobody expected. Chioma was still trying to rebuild her life after her failed marriage. The sons continued making choices that worried their parents. And the atmosphere inside the once proud household had changed. The laughter was gone. The confidence was gone. The certainty that everything would work out had disappeared. Madam Ngozi began spending more time thinking. More time remembering. More time reflecting on the years that had passed. At first, she blamed other people. She blamed friends. She blamed society. She blamed bad influences. But eventually, a different thought entered her mind. A thought she had spent years avoiding. What if some of these problems had started at home? What if the issue was not only the world outside? What if some of the mistakes had been made inside her own house? The questions haunted her. And strangely, whenever she thought about those questions, one face kept appearing in her memory. Adaeze. The quiet girl who had once carried the weight of the entire household. The girl she had promised to educate. The girl who disappeared years ago. For a long time, Madam Ngozi had convinced herself that Adaeze's departure was simply one of life's unfortunate events. But now, something felt different. Now, she found herself wondering about the girl she had not thought about in years. Where was she? What had become of her? Was she surviving? Was she struggling? Did she hate them? The questions would not leave her alone. And as fate would have it, the answers were closer than she imagined. Because somewhere in Lagos, Adaeze was living a life that nobody in Chief Okonkwo's household expected. Not a perfect life. Not a wealthy life. But a life built on something powerful. Hard work. The very thing she had been forced to learn. And before long, news of that life would find its way back to the family she left behind. When it did, it would force everyone to confront a truth they had spent years running from. A truth about promises. A truth about parenting. And a truth about the difference between protecting a child and preparing a child for life. The day of reckoning was coming. And nobody was ready for what it would reveal. There is a saying that life has a way of completing every story. Not always in the way we expect. Not always in the way we want. But eventually, life reveals the results of the choices people make. Years had passed since Adaeze left Chief Okonkwo's house. Years. The frightened young girl who once arrived in Lagos carrying nothing but hope was gone. In her place stood a woman shaped by struggle, discipline, and determination. Her journey had not been easy. There were setbacks. There were disappointments. There were moments when she questioned herself. Moments when she wondered whether she would ever truly recover from the years she had lost. But every obstacle taught her something. Every challenge strengthened her. And little by little, her life moved forward. By now, many traders and business owners around Alaba Market knew her. People trusted her. People respected her. People knew that when Adaeze gave her word, she meant it. She was not rich. She was not famous. But she had built something that nobody could take away from her. A reputation. And for someone who had once been treated as invisible, that meant everything. One afternoon, while discussing business with a customer, Adaeze received unexpected news. Someone from her village had recognized her. The person had been asking questions. As the conversation continued, Adaeze learned something surprising. People back home were talking about her. Not because of scandal. Not because of trouble. But because they had heard she was doing well. For a moment, she smiled. The village she left behind had never completely forgotten her. And perhaps she had never completely forgotten it. Meanwhile, in Chief Okonkwo's household, life looked very different from the way it once had. The grand mansion still stood. The expensive cars were still there. The family name still carried respect. But beneath the surface, things had changed. The confidence that once filled the house had faded. The dreams Madame Ngozi carried for her children had not unfolded the way she imagined. Chioma was still trying to rebuild her life. The sons continued struggling with their own challenges. And for the first time, Madame Ngozi could no longer ignore the uncomfortable questions in her heart. One evening, during a family gathering, someone mentioned Adaeze's name. The room became quiet. At first, nobody said much. Then a relative spoke. "I heard that girl is doing well for herself now." Another person nodded. "I heard people respect her where she works." A third person added. "That girl was always hardworking." The words hit Madame Ngozi harder than she expected. Hardworking. She had heard that word before. Many times. But now it sounded different. Now it felt like an accusation. Because deep down, she knew something painful. The discipline that helped Adaeze survive was not something she intentionally taught with kindness. It had been forged through years of hardship. And suddenly, Madame Ngozi found herself comparing lives. The girl she once overlooked was building a future. Meanwhile, some of the children she protected were still struggling to find direction. That realization stayed with her long after the gathering ended. For days, she could not stop thinking about it. Then one morning, she finally spoke to Chief Okonkwo. The conversation was short. But it was honest. For perhaps the first time in years, they discussed Adaeze openly. The chief listened carefully. As details surfaced, pieces of the puzzle began coming together. Things he had never fully understood. Things he had never noticed. Things he wished he had paid more attention to. The conversation left him troubled. Very troubled. Because if even half of what he was hearing was true, then someone had suffered under his roof while he remained unaware. And that thought was difficult to live with. Days later, another piece of news arrived. News that surprised the entire family. Adaeze had returned to the village for a visit. Not as the frightened girl who once left, but as a confident woman. A woman standing on her own feet. A woman carrying herself with dignity. The news spread quickly. Some people were happy for her. Others were shocked. A few could hardly believe it. But one thing was certain. Nobody was looking at her the same way anymore. And as word continued spreading, one question quietly began circulating through the community. If Adaeze could rise after everything she endured, what might she have become if the promise made to her had actually been kept? That question hung in the air. And for some people, it became impossible to answer. Because the truth was painful. A future had been delayed. Opportunities had been lost. Years had been wasted. Yet somehow, she still found a way to move forward. And that was the part of the story nobody expected. But the story was not over yet. Because before this chapter closed, there was one final lesson waiting to be learned. A lesson about promises. A lesson about parenting. And a lesson about the consequences that often arrive years after the decisions that created them. Years earlier, a promise had been made in a small village. A promise that gave two parents hope. A promise that made a young girl dream. A promise that changed the direction of several lives. Now, many years later, the consequences of that promise stood before everyone to see. Life had moved on. People had grown older. Children had become adults. Dreams had risen and fallen. But some memories never completely disappear. One afternoon, while visiting the village, Adaeze stood outside the small house where she had grown up. The building looked smaller than she remembered. The road seemed narrower. The trees seemed shorter. Yet the memories felt as vivid as ever. She remembered the excitement. She remembered the tears. She remembered the day she left believing her future had finally arrived. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Not because she was angry. Not because she wanted revenge. But because she finally understood something. Holding on to bitterness would not return the years she lost. It would not change the past. It would not heal the wounds. The only thing it could do was steal more of her future. And Adaeze had already lost enough. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, Madam Ngozi was facing battles of her own. The life she imagined for her children had not unfolded as planned. Some struggled with responsibility. Some struggled with direction. Some struggled with the consequences of choices made over many years. For the first time, she could no longer blame anyone else. Not relatives. Not friends. Not society. Not bad influences. Because deep inside, she knew one painful truth. Children learn more from what parents permit than from what parents preach. The lessons she failed to teach when they were young had not disappeared. Life was teaching those lessons now. Only this time, the lessons were far more painful. One evening, Chief Okonkwo sat quietly outside his house. Age had softened him. Experience had humbled him. And as he reflected on the years gone by, one thought kept returning to him. How much had he failed to see? He had worked hard to provide for his family. He had built businesses. He had earned respect. But somewhere along the way, important things had happened under his own roof without his knowledge. That realization stayed with him. Not as anger. Not as blame. But as regret. The kind of regret that arrives when life gives no opportunity to go back and make different choices. As for Adaeze, her journey continued. The years taken from her could never be returned. The education she was promised could never be fully recovered. The opportunities she missed would always remain part of her story. Yet somehow, she refused to allow those losses to define her. Instead, she built a life from what remained. Piece by piece. Step by step. Day by day. And perhaps that became the greatest lesson of all. Because this story was never really about wealth. It was never really about a mansion. It was never really about status. It was about choices. The choice to keep a promise. Or break it. The choice to prepare children for life. Or protect them from every responsibility. The choice to remain silent. Or speak up when something is wrong. Years earlier, everyone thought Chief Okonkwo's family was the family to admire. The family to envy. The family to imitate. But life eventually revealed a different truth. The child who was denied opportunity learned resilience. The children who had every opportunity struggled to understand responsibility. And in the end, life reminded everyone of a lesson that many people forget. A person's future is not built by comfort alone. It is built by character, by discipline, by responsibility, by integrity. And those qualities cannot be bought with money. They must be learned. As the sun slowly set over the village, Adaeze smiled and continued walking. Her story was not perfect. Her journey was not easy. But it was hers. And despite everything she had endured, she was still moving forward. The promise they made to her was never kept. But she refused to let that broken promise become the end of her story. Instead, she turned it into the beginning of a new one. And perhaps that is the greatest victory of all. The end.